I'm Samantha Overton, 34, and I stopped by my grandfather's house on a gray Tuesday in October without calling first. Walter opened the door before I finished knocking. His face was the color of paper. He grabbed my sleeve, pulled me inside, and whispered words I still hear at night. Get inside. Hide right now. I heard tires on the gravel behind me, my mother's car. He pushed me toward the gap behind the pantry cabinet. He didn't look confused. He looked like a man who'd been waiting for me. In the next 40 minutes, I heard things that changed how I saw my mother forever, and what I did after broke my family apart. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet people find their voice and the truth always finds its way to the table. If stories about family, courage, and standing your ground move you, drop a comment and subscribe. The gap smelled like cold coffee and old wood. My heart hit my ribs so hard I was sure they'd hear it. The front door opened without a knock. My mother's voice came first, bright in a way I hadn't heard in years. "Dad, it's just us." Footsteps crossed the living room. I recognized Gerald's slow walk, the man she'd married a year ago, and a third set of steps, quick and light. Heels. A stranger. My grandfather asked, thin and wandering, if anyone wanted tea. Nobody answered. Instead, the stranger set something heavy on the coffee table, papers, a thick stack that made a soft, expensive slap. "We'll keep this simple, Walter," she said. "Just a few signatures today." My mother made the soothing sound she used to make when I was small and scared. It used to mean safety. Now it made my skin crawl. Whatever was happening in that room wasn't a visit. It was an operation, and my grandfather had known it was coming. That was why he'd hidden me. Let me back up. My mother, Paula, is 57, and she ran our family like a thermostat, warm and everyone relaxed, cold and we all rearranged ourselves to warm her back up. I'm a geriatric nurse. I know what it looks like when someone healthy is treated as if they're already gone. Gerald, 60, wore good shoes and talked about deals that never closed. The woman with the heels I'd never seen. 3 weeks earlier, my grandfather had stopped calling me on Sundays, and a bank letter meant for him had shown up forwarded to my mother's address. I'd called the bank. They couldn't discuss another person's account with me. I told myself I was being paranoid. Crouched behind that pantry, I understood I hadn't been. I'd been early and let myself be talked out of it. The stranger walked him through it in a flat, practiced voice. Financial power of attorney, so my mother could manage his accounts, his bills, everything. Gerald said the house was too much for a man alone. There was a lovely place across the county, and once the house sold, it would pay for the best care. My grandfather asked what would happen to his garden. Nobody answered. My mother's voice dropped to her register for hard truths. "Dad, you forget things now. This is for your own good." Then, "He won't remember by Christmas anyway." She said it the way you'd mention rain. Not cruel exactly, worse than cruel. Certain. Through the crack, I watched his hand on the armrest, not shaking, steady, writing something small on a scrap of paper where they couldn't see. The man they'd just declared too far gone to run his own life was quietly taking notes. He wasn't the one who needed saving. He was running the trap. For the next few minutes, he gave the best performance I've ever seen, forgetting Gerald's name, asking about the garden 3 times until my mother's patience frayed, fumbling the pen off the floor. They decided he was too tired to sign today. They'd come back at the weekend. While they gathered their coats, he turned his head slowly toward the kitchen, and for 1 second his eyes were sharp and completely present. He found me in the dark, like he'd known the whole time. The smallest shake of his head. "Stay quiet. Wait." Then the fog rolled back. They left. The car pulled out. I counted to 60 in the dark. Then, in his own real voice, "You can come out now, Sam." He looked 10 years younger and unspeakably tired at once. He'd suspected for months that Paula and Gerald were after the house, and had started playing forgetful so they'd show him the whole plan instead of taking it piece by piece. "If I'd told you," he said, "you'd have found a reason to doubt me. You needed to hear it yourself." That was why he'd hidden me, not panic. Strategy. He pressed a scrap of paper into my hand. A name and a number. Ruth Delgado, an elder law attorney who'd handled his affairs decades ago. Underneath, not a phone number, a dollar amount. $18,000. That's what's gone, he said, in 3 months. Small withdrawals spaced out so they wouldn't trip an alarm. A new authorized contact had been added to help him, and the help was bleeding him dry. He'd stopped calling me Sundays because Paula had started dropping by then, and he didn't want her to know how close we still were. The house he'd built, the retirement he'd saved 4 decades for, the little memorial fund in my grandmother's name, all of it was on the table. And so was his dignity, which mattered most. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of being erased while still alive. "They're not getting this house," I said. He almost smiled. "Then we'd better hurry. She has a key." That night, I researched. Adult children are the most common perpetrators of elder financial abuse, nearly 40% of cases reported to federal regulators. And a power of attorney, once signed, is brutally hard to undo. My mother would be operating inside the law, with my grandfather's own name giving her permission. At 2 a.m., I started writing down everything I knew: dates, amounts, the forwarded letter, the stranger with the papers. Ruth Delgado remembered him instantly. Sharpest man in Bellhaven. She'd spent 30 years in elder law and had seen this machine before. As long as he hadn't signed, the door was open, but closing. We needed 3 things: proof of mental competence from a real doctor, documentation of the money already moved, and a report to Adult Protective Services. If they'd scheduled a signing this weekend, we were talking days, not weeks. "Get him a capacity evaluation from someone credible," she said. "That's the wall they can't climb, because their whole plan rests on one lie, that he's not competent. Prove he is, and it collapses." She dealt in warmth turned on and off, in guilt. My weapons were documentation. I called Dr. Hale, a geriatrician I'd worked beside for 6 years. He booked Walter for a full cognitive evaluation 2 days out, real scoring that would stand up anywhere. "Let them say I'm gone," my grandfather said. "I'll take the test and prove I'm here." My mother called the next morning, sweet, fishing. She'd hate for him to sign a bad contract or get scammed. The old me would have rushed to reassure her. I felt the reflex rise and swallowed it. "That's really sad, Mom," I said, and nothing else. She mentioned, casually, Grandpa's 81st birthday party at month's end. The whole family, neighbors, the pastor. She wanted witnesses, so whatever she planned would look like consensus, not a robbery. Wednesday, I took my grandfather to the bank to change his mailing address back and pull 6 months of statements. A young banker named Trevor got more uncomfortable by the minute. A limited authorization had let Gerald be added as a signer, notarized, technically in order. And someone had already called ahead to say a financial power of attorney naming my mother was coming, so the bank would be ready to honor it the moment it landed. The document wasn't signed yet, but the rails were laid. They weren't waiting on the bank. They were waiting on him at the party, surrounded by people. That night, I found the stranger. Renata Poole, an elder care consultant. Not a lawyer, not a licensed social worker, just a notary who got elderly people to sign fast before family could object, on commission. Her online booking page showed a long block held for the afternoon of my grandfather's birthday. No client name. They'd planned it down to the hour. Cake, balloons, love, then papers in front of everyone. Thursday, Dr. Hale examined him for 2 hours and pronounced him one of the sharpest 80-year-olds he'd seen in years. Fully oriented, excellent recall, sound judgment, dated and signed. In the car after, my grandfather set an old tin box on my lap, my grandmother's. "It's time you had this," he said. "Open it at home, alone, and read the letter first." That night I opened it. On top, a letter in my grandmother Nora's hand, written weeks before she died. She'd watched money curdle other families and was afraid of it happening to hers. She wrote that Paula had spent her childhood believing Walter loved his memorial work, the church, the whole town more than his own daughter, and that some of that hurt was real, some a story Paula told herself, and both kinds can rot a person from the inside. "Don't let money decide who we are to each other," she wrote. Underneath, my grandfather's original will and a deed of intention. The house was never meant to be sold. It was meant to fund a nursing scholarship in Nora's name. Friday, I filed with Adult Protective Services, the forwarded mail, the $18,000, the added authorized user, the pending power of attorney application, Renata Poole's commission and booked appointment, the doctor's evaluation. Facts with dates, because that's what moves a bureaucracy. The caseworker said she'd open an investigation, but realistically, it would take weeks, not fast enough for the party. If my grandfather was going to be protected, it would happen in that living room, and I would have to be the one to do it. My mother found out about the doctor. She called Saturday, no honey left in her voice. "What do you think you're doing?" She called me a troublemaker, said I was tearing the family apart, that a real daughter would trust her mother. Guilt, the oldest weapon, the one that had worked my entire life. I waited for the fold. It didn't come. "I'm not going to argue with you, Mom," I said, steadier than I'd ever sounded. "I love Grandpa, and I'm not going to be quiet." She hissed that I'd regret this and hung up. For 34 years, I'd apologized to keep the peace. That day, I didn't. She moved fast. She changed the locks, told relatives I was manipulating him and after the house. 2 cousins stopped answering my texts. For 2 days, I couldn't reach him at all. I drove past her house once and saw her sitting alone in her car, crying, really crying. Gerald's business had collapsed, taking their savings with it. They were closer to losing their own home than anyone knew. I felt a pull of pity, then remembered his question about the garden, and hers about Christmas, and the pity found its proper size. Frightened doesn't mean forgiven. I got to him through my own profession. A friend, Denise, ran a legitimate home health service. My grandfather requested a wellness visit himself, his right, and my mother couldn't refuse without looking exactly like what she was. He was fine, sharp, eating well, and he'd sent a message. Before the locks changed, he'd signed a limited legal authorization with Ruth, freely, with an independent witness, a narrow instrument protecting his accounts while he stayed fully in charge. He'd built his own countermove while I built mine. "Tell Sam not to worry about the party. Tell her to let them bring their papers." Ruth gave me the most important advice of the whole ordeal. You can't just accuse your mother. It becomes your word against hers. Let her show them herself. Let her produce the papers, make her pitch, commit in front of everyone. Then put the truth on the table. Facts, not feelings. I asked if she'd come to the party. I wouldn't miss it. I spent 6 days assembling a plain manila folder. Dr. Hale's evaluation on top, the bank printout with the $18,000 highlighted, and Gerald's authorized user paperwork. The APS investigation letter, the documentation on Renata Poole, and at the back, my grandmother's letter and the original will with its deed of intention. I decided against secretly recording anything. That would have made this a gotcha instead of the truth. 2 days out, my cousin told me the choreography. After cake, my mother would gather everyone, give a speech about how hard this was, how his memory was failing, then invite him to sign for transparency so everyone can see it's his choice, with the pastor and Walter's oldest neighbors watching. She'd built a room full of witnesses to bless her. Fine. A room full of witnesses cuts both ways. The night before, I talked to my grandfather a long time. "You remember what I told you. Get inside, hide right now. That was the last time you'll ever need to hide from your mother," he said. "Tomorrow, you stand where everyone can see you." Then he told me his plan. He'd play the fog one final time, let Paula commit fully in front of every guest before he dropped the act. I need her to show them who she is before she finds out who I am. It was a risk, but it was his call, his life, his house. The party looked like love. 80 gold balloons, a sheet cake, casseroles, the pastor shaking hands, and in the middle of it, my mother, radiant, playing the devoted daughter, moving through the room, accepting sympathy for how hard it was to watch her father decline. It was a performance so smooth it turned my stomach, because I could finally see what it was for. Not the house, not even the money, but this, the image, the good daughter admired by the whole town. Gerald watched the door with a drink he wasn't drinking. Renata waited near the hallway with a slim leather folio. My grandfather sat by the window, small and vague, letting a neighbor pat his hand. He didn't look at me. I found a spot near the fireplace with my folder against my side. My mother tapped her wine glass. "Everyone," she said, "I have an announcement about Dad." She told the story beautifully, how he'd been struggling, how it broke her heart, how somebody had to protect him. Neighbors nodded, faces soft. "So today," she said, "with all of you here, so there's no secret about any of it, Dad's going to sign over financial power of attorney to me, out in the open, so everyone can see it's his wish." Renata opened the folio, uncapped a pen. My grandfather looked up with damp, confused eyes and asked if it was time for cake. The room laughed gently. Renata guided the pen toward his hand. "Just here, Walter, right on the line." I stepped into the middle of the floor. "Before Grandpa signs anything," I said, level, not loud, "I think everyone here should hear a few things first." My mother's smile stayed fixed. Her eyes went flat. "Samantha, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," I said. "You wanted this done in the open. Good. Let's do it in the open." I opened the folder, one page at a time. A full cognitive evaluation, done 3 days ago, completely competent, sharp memory, sound judgment. A murmur moved through the room. His bank record, $18,000 in withdrawals he never made, and the paperwork adding Gerald as an authorized user, notarized by that woman. A letter from Adult Protective Services confirming an investigation into financial abuse. The word landed like a dropped plate. And this woman with the pen is Renata Poole, not a lawyer, not a social worker. A notary paid a commission for every elderly person she gets to sign fast, with an appointment booked for this exact afternoon. Renata capped her pen, insisting everything she did was completely legal. "There's nothing legal about rushing a competent man into signing away his assets," said a new voice from the doorway. Ruth Delgado stepped in. "I'm Mr. Rayburn's attorney. He granted me limited authority 2 weeks ago, freely, with a witness, precisely because he knew this was coming. You may want to speak to your own lawyer." Renata left without another word. Then everyone looked at Gerald, drained of confidence. "The $18,000 went into an account you're on," I said. "Your business closed in the spring. You're behind on your own house." He found nothing to say. My grandfather stood, not the way a frail man stands, but the way a judge rises. The fog was gone completely. "I'd like to say something at my own party," he said, and the room went silent. "I'm not confused. I haven't been. I've known for months what my daughter and her husband were planning, and I let them think I was slipping so they'd show me the whole of it. I asked my granddaughter to hide in my kitchen the day they came with those papers, so she'd hear it herself. Everything she just showed you is true. Nothing gets signed in this house today." I stepped up beside him. "No one signs anything today, Mom," I said. "It's over." That was when she broke. All the polish cracked and fell away. "You have no idea what I've given up for this family," she shouted. 40 years I stood in his shadow while he poured everything into that memorial, into strangers, and I got nothing. Now you all stand here judging me." The villain of the room was no longer a confused old man being robbed. It was a shouting woman, red-faced, blaming her own father on his birthday in front of the pastor she'd invited to lend her credibility. I stayed quiet and let her keep proving everything on that table. When she finally ran out of breath, I said gently, "Get inside. Hide right now. That's what Grandpa told me the day you came for his house. I hid, and I heard everything. I'm not hiding anymore, and neither is he." She had no answer. I held up Dr. Hale's evaluation, not as a weapon now, just a fact. "You told them he wouldn't remember by Christmas anyway," I said. "He'll remember this Christmas, and everyone after it." She looked at her father, standing tall and clear-eyed, and understood it was finished. The pastor put a hand on her arm and led her toward the door, past the balloons, past the untouched cake, past neighbors who wouldn't meet her eyes. Gerald had already slipped out. At the threshold, she looked back once at her father. Whatever she was hoping to see, she didn't find it. The door clicked shut and the house was quiet, and his again. "Well," he said to the stunned room, "who wants cake?" Somehow, impossibly, people laughed. The weeks after were quiet, because the truth doesn't need much noise once it's out. Adult Protective Services confirmed everything the folder showed. The pending power of attorney was killed before it took effect. With Ruth's help, most of the $18,000 was traced and recovered. Renata Poole was reported to the state and the licensing board. I heard she'd stopped taking new clients in the county. Gerald left once there was nothing left to take. My mother wasn't arrested. My grandfather could have pressed it, but decided against it. "She's still my daughter," he told me. "I don't want her in a cell. I want her out of my accounts." So that's what he got. She lost every ounce of access to his money, and she lost the image she'd spent a lifetime building, because Bellhaven is a small town and everyone at that party had a mouth. My grandfather stayed in his house, in his garden, with his own key in his own pocket. We set up the Nora Rayburn Nursing Scholarship, funded exactly as she'd dreamed, sending young women through nursing school in her name. He asked me to help run it, and I said yes before he finished the sentence. Something in that living room changed the direction of my life. I'd walked in a nurse who'd spent 34 years folding to keep the peace, and I walked out understanding that staying quiet had never once kept anyone safe. I started volunteering with an elder rights group, being the calm voice with the folder full of facts I'd had to become for my grandfather. My grandmother had wanted the house to send nurses to school. In the end, it sent me somewhere too. If there's one thing I learned crouched behind that pantry cabinet and standing in the middle of that living room, it's this. Protecting the people who raised us isn't betrayal. Staying silent while they're robbed is. That's how a whisper became a stand. If someone you love is being pushed to sign something they don't understand, don't wait. Ask questions, keep records, make the call. Share this so it reaches someone who needs it. Tell me in the comments if you've ever had to stand up to your own family, and subscribe to my channel.